Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Rick, as always. I'm joined today by my friend Andrew Weissmann, former prosecutor, former member of Robert Mueller's team, enemy of the state, legal analyst on MSNBC, all around smart guy about things that affect us on the legal side, on the consequential moment we're in on the courts. He is traveling today, so he's a little ahead of us time zone wise, but as we're recording this at about 9 in the morning, we've got a bunch of Supreme Court cases coming down the pike today. So, Andrew, that's what I really wanted to talk to you about and get your take on. This court has one case that I think is particularly consequential, and that's the birthright citizenship question. Where do you see this coming down, and what does it mean if this court says, nah, the 14th Amendment doesn't say what it means?
So here's the key thing is I think everybody's thinking, oh, they're going to weigh in on the actual merits. Just to be clear, to quote Justice Kagan, she keeps on saying, hey, you've been losing government all over the country. I mean, every single court that has addressed this has said, as a judge where I grew up said, I've got two words for you, denied. So on the merits of it, judges across the political spectrum have said no. The first federal judge to do that was appointed by President Reagan, and he basically said, "Where were the lawyers before you did any of this?" He just was appalled. All of that is to say, what the issue is that is before the Supreme Court is not actually the merits, and this is so telling. The government didn't yet appeal the merits. I mean, which is just unbelievable because, if you normally think you're right, you'd be like, okay, this is our view. But no, they're appealing this procedural issue, which is should federal district courts have the power to issue nationwide injunctions so that they can't just issue an injunction that governs just their own court or the little district they're in, but rather the whole country. And to be fair, this is an issue that's been kicking around for a long time. Most administrations don't like nationwide injunctions. So, when Democrats are in power in the White House, they're like, it's not such a great idea. When Republicans, when they were suing Joe Biden, they loved nationwide jurisdiction. So it's a little weird that the Supreme Court decided they were going to finally take up this issue in this case. I mean, to me, that's so political that this is the one where you're going to do it. And frankly, if there's any case where there would be some validity to having a nationwide injunction, it would be this one, because there's no merit to the argument. And then just imagine if you are potentially subject to this, it's going to depend on what part of the country you're in or move to. I mean, it would be ludicrous to think that if you are validly in the country but under a visa and have a child, that whether you're in Arizona versus whether you're in Washington State is going to depend on whether this administration is going to just extract you from the country and potentially throw you in jail in a foreign country. I mean, it's an odd vehicle to do this. So that's what we're waiting to see, is what they're going to decide on this procedural issue. It is conceivable that they will say something in passing on the merits, but that's not really their style, right? That's not presented to them.
So, I mean, the court seems to me like, I feel like the culture war has sort of taken to the court now, and you've got Thomas and Alito who are this rejectionist faction now. Is this the kind of case where Roberts is trying to rule on the very narrow technocratic side of this and not get into a space where there is that sort of sticky cultural resonance to the court's decision?
I do think this is one where, in spite of the fact that it's an odd case to have chosen to do this, I mean, I just don't know why. If you're trying to keep the court out, I mean, the court is going to be right in the middle of everything. This was sort of a needless foot fault if you're trying to keep the court as away from this as possible, which they need to do, I think, just for their integrity. But I do think, having taken it, that there's a way to decide this. And this is where the plaintiffs were basically saying, look, there's a way to do this where even if you think that nationwide injunctions should be restricted, that you give criteria and your notes just say they're never okay, that there's ways to do this in that's sort of a boring legal way where you come up with the different criteria, and it's a balancing, and it's like what we do. It's why people don't like lawyers, because it's always like, people ask for a question and you say, well, it depends.
Right. It's rarely the sort of like thunderclap yes, no. Right.
Other than is birthright citizenship is one of the thunderclaps where it's like, that's where it's like, that's really like, I don't really curse, but it's like, what on God green earth were you thinking?
Right.
It's just crazy.
Right. Well, so some of the other cases coming down, I mean, the redistricting case, I think was the Louisiana case was kind of fascinating. What else are you watching for in this final sort of burst of this year?
I actually, there's a few immigration issues that are still coming up. And so I would say people should bear with me for a second. But one of the things that was, there was a case in Massachusetts. It has the unhelpful name of DVD, like those things that we all used to use. Right, but those are acronyms that were allowed so that it would the plaintiffs wouldn't be jeopardized or prejudiced. So anyway, that was a case where the district judge has made repeated findings of the government disobeying his orders and removing people to foreign countries in spite of his saying, do not do this. I mean, it sort of happened over and over again. And just a horrendous record. And, we've been seeing this not just in Massachusetts, but we have the same kinds of issues that are being litigated in Maryland and in Washington, D.C. And the kicker is 2 days ago, a former DOJ 15-year veteran who worked for Donald Trump, was promoted by Donald Trump, who argued some of the most controversial things for the Trump administration 1.0. In other words, he argued the Trump Muslim ban. He filed an over 30-page whistleblower complaint talking about how people, in as he said it, in his view, deliberately undermined the court and lied to them and had a view of, and he has a very colorful language that he says Emile Bove said, which Bove says Bove actually doesn't say he didn't say it. He says, I don't remember, which, by the way, can I just give a pause for that? I remember when I used to do organized crime work and we had this mobster and we were talking to him and he obviously didn't want to say anything about the Gambino family. And I was like, well, did you ever meet John Gotti, the boss of the Gambino family? And he's like, I don't remember. And I'm like, that's like me saying to you, Rick, well, do you remember whether you ever met like President Obama or President Trump? And you're like, I don't really remember.
I don't recall.
Yeah. I also there's a defendant on the stand and I was like, well, did you ever commit bank fraud? And he's like, I don't recall. I mean, like, you kind of would know if you did.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a little bit of an aside, but Emile Bove did not deny it. He says he doesn't remember if he's told people that the courts would have to,
to F off. Yeah.
F off. Yes, exactly. So it's so weird. In real life, I curse all the time, but for some reason, I just don't do it now. But so the thing that happened in the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court with no articulation of why stayed what the district court had been doing. It just said, we stay it. That means at least 5 justices agreed with that, but we don't know why. We have no reason whatsoever. And he was in the middle of trying to get to the bottom of like what was going on and why they are disobeying his orders. And now the case that is still pending in the Supreme Court is the district judge said, look, I still have some ability to go forward here. And the government filed this emergency application in the Supreme Court saying, no, court, tell him to stop. And I think in light of the Ruveni whistleblower material coming out and just what an affront this is to the federal judiciary, it's like, are there going to be 5 justices who have enough gumption to say, are you joking? We are an independent branch of the government, and the big picture for this, since I know this seems very much in the weeds, but the reason I care about this is we already have a Congress that is completely asleep because it's controlled by Republicans. And so like on war powers issues, on all sorts of issues, they're not doing their job. The idea that the courts are going to back down now, I mean, we're not seeing it so much at the district court level, but the Supreme Court, they need to be backing the judges whose orders are being violated. That is not how you behave. And just to be clear, that is not how you behave in any normal administration of the Department of Justice, Republican or Democratic. None of my friends would view this as acceptable. It's not a partisan issue.
You know, Andrew, that's to my mind, this is the fundamental constitutional crisis that we're in. It's not about the individual cases in some ways. It's about the relationship of the federal government in the, Article 1, 2, and 3 lay it out pretty clearly. And yet in Congress, as you point out, the Republicans are just supine. They're just off the radar. They're going to do what he says. And I wonder if, famous quote unquote institutionalist John Roberts is going to have some leadership here, because as they continue to ignore court orders everywhere, and you're right, it's not just the Massachusetts, it is on a daily basis. You'll see, X or Y was deported after the court said don't deport X or Y. And I wonder how long we can sustain that with the court system, because at some point, if the administration can get away with that, they're just going to say, well, I know the court ruled on X, but we disagree, so fuck you. Oh, sorry. See, there's my line.
No, exactly. Look, this does not take like a legal scholar and should know what the position is here.
Right.
The administration's view is we're doing whatever we want to do, stop us. And until we're told, and actually even after we're told not to do it, we're going to do it.
Right.
And so I just think that justices who have said twice, for instance, all 9 of them, that the due process rights of the people in El Salvador who were extracted by this administration and then shoved into prison without any notice and any charges, that their due process rights were violated. I mean, this falls into the no friggin' kidding. But you have 9 justices agreeing to that. When has that ever happened in our lifetimes? With this composition of this court, but they have to put teeth on that. And you know what? If they need to, if there's going to be a constitutional crisis, they need to tee it up. You know what's a worse constitutional crisis? Going out with a whimper where they basically just ignore the fact that we now don't just have a unitary executive, we have a unitary government. Where we don't actually have the other 2 branches doing anything.
It is striking to me how swiftly the independence of DOJ has been erased. It is now it is now what Trump wanted. It's his personal law firm now. Again, the House is no surprise. The Senate still has occasional like twitches of life once in a while. But if we lose the courts, this is a unitary government like that, then the courts become just window dressing.
Right. Well, there are theorists who say that in this day and age, what an autocracy, an authoritarian regime looks like is not the sort of, Fidel Castro sort of like, I'm a dictator. It has the outward trappings of a democracy, but it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I mean, the core is actually not there. So it will look like we have a Supreme Court. It will look like we have a Congress, but they're not doing any of the functions, if this happens, that were envisaged by the Constitution.
Yeah, Tim Snyder writes about that, and Ann Applebaum as well, where you even have elections. They look like elections. But it was like Saddam Hussein used to win 102% of the vote. And Kim Jong-un wins, no other candidates ever choose to file. It's amazing. But so What other cases are you keeping an eye on for today beyond the immigration?
So yeah, there are a couple cases that are sort of interesting. There's this case where I was just chatting about it before we got on, where the issue is what can be sort of taught in schools,
Right.
And there was sort of a big
Is that the Maryland case?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was sort of people saying, well, it's against my religion to have my kids exposed to certain books, and so I want to sort of take them out of class when this topic is raised. And I remember Justice Kavanaugh basically saying, "Hey, what's the big deal? Why can't you just do that?" And you could see the at least maybe I'm just intuiting it because I just thought that was not the greatest question, because it's like, I'm sorry, your job as a judge is to not just think about what happens in this case. It's to think about, if I make this rule, what's going to happen, sort of, because you have to apply it to everything. So what every single school in the country is going to have every single parent be able to constantly take their kids in and out of class. Remember, you're supposed to attend class. And if every single kid can basically say, not feeling like it, granted, they have to have a religious reason, but it's like, you can't run a system that way. It was just such a crazy, but I could see them going down that road of trying to come up with this compromise, but it's not about this particular case. It's like, how's that going to work for every school?
That rabbit hole strikes me as one that if they go down that way, I mean, imagine this. Texas just posted the 10 Commandments in all the classrooms in the state. What happens when a Muslim parent says nope?
Yeah, I mean, this is one where I'm actually really interested in what Amy Coney Barrett has to say here. I mean, I disagree with her substantively on her view of a number of things, but I have to say, I think she's kind of a sleeper in that. I think she's really smart. I think she writes incredibly well, and she really gives the impression that she is an honest broker, that she is honest. Like, and that doesn't mean you have to agree with her, but in this day and age, that's a lot to say. That you really get the sense that she is not just like a good person, a smart person, and an honest person. And so I do think, like, she's going to get the problem of how do you run a system and how do you do this and what kind of accommodation you really should.
And she's got kids in that age window as well, which I think is unique on the court for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, she has a number of kids, and some adopted, some not, and also different races. I mean, sort of. I mean, she really seems like somebody who lives her values. So that you don't have to share everyone's values, but as you can tell, I'm sort of like I'm becoming like a groupie.
I'm fascinated by her because on the one hand, they were so confident. The Trump people were so confident, and this is before the schism between Leonard Leo and Donald Trump. Obviously, they were so confident. They're like, she's the superstar. She's going to be the one who takes Roe v. Wade off the docket and does whatever. We didn't know it was going to be called Dobbs, but they were confident she was the one who would deliver the end of Roe. And I think they thought, because of her Catholicism and everything else, I think they thought that she was basically going to be a patsy after that, or be done after that. She clearly has another, much more independent streak than anybody anticipated.
Yeah. So I think the best sign of that is, I mean, obviously there's a case where she she was in dissent against the government, and Justice Jackson was actually in the majority, ruling for the Trump administration.
Rare enough.
Yeah, so that was sort of interesting. But I think on the big presidential immunity decision from last year, her concurrence is really interesting, because on really key issues, the decision was not 6-3; it was 5-4. And her concurrence is one where it's just such a shame that neither Roberts nor Kavanaugh could join that, because it is a rational decision that is, I think, appropriately recognizing the power of the executive and limiting the power of the executive.
Right.
And in many ways, what we are living through right now is it's not entirely brought on by that case, but that case was such license to what we're seeing now. Because you know what happened in that case? John Sauer who was then representing Donald Trump, went to the Supreme Court, and he got more than he asked for. And remember, this is the case where the questions were constantly, are you saying that a president could order the SEAL Team 6? Right. And so I think what you're seeing now is John Sauer saying, well, let's go for it. Like the worst that happens is they say no, but we've been in a situation where we thought they never would give us this. We didn't even ask for it and we got it. So the message is really one of go for broke.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that they've won so many big battles with this court that it feels like they should just try to write the biggest check they can. And it's fascinating to me that that Thomas and Alito have become such champions of untrammeled executive power at this late stage. When had it been Barack Obama, which I find to my mind, the partisan read from them is what's really sort of.
Rick, that's so yesterday. That's looking through a lens of principles.
I know. I know. God forbid the court should have people of principled moral character on it.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, you're totally, completely right. But it is just unbelievable. It's really just a question of, what political side are you on? They're not seeing this as a consistent value.
I mean, one of this, it hasn't really come before this court yet, but in the lower courts right now, I'm fascinated that all my old Republican buddies who were the pocket Constitution guys who talked about the 10th Amendment every single minute of the day suddenly look at California and go, no, they have to do exactly what Trump wants them to do. There's no 10th Amendment. What are you talking about? States' rights. How absurd. It's crazy to me just how that authoritarian flip has happened.
Yeah, you cannot go to I see it on that. I see it on originalism. There's that. I mean, this is when we're, you see liberals, by the way, using this idea of that agencies shouldn't be deferred to, which was sort of a big Republican issue. Right, exactly. There's sort of Chevron doctrine. So the liberals are now using that because, of course, now the agencies are controlled by Republicans. So they're like, what happened to the fact that the Chevron deference is dead? So why are you deferring to them? And that's like, oh, did we say that?
What?
It's like Chevron for Democrats, right?
Right. Well, it's going to be a hell of a day today. I think there's going to be there'll be a number of judgments out of the court this afternoon that I think surprise people. But I want to thank you, Andrew. Go ahead.
One thing people should note, although it's very rare, but it does occasionally happen where the court spills over, and although it's the last day, not everything comes out. So. I think that happened last year when we were all waiting for decisions. It's worth noting that it is technically their last day of the term, but it's not like they're doing something illegal by spilling over. Right. So we may not get everything today.
Right. And a lot of the stuff on the shadow docket has sort of, I think, change the timing chain of last days, etc. So
also given what is going on, I don't think these people are going to be able to take off the summer as they usually do. And,
right.
I think Chief Justice Roberts famously went off to Malta saying he needed to be on an impregnable rock in the middle of the sea to sort of avoid being attacked. But I don't think he's going to be able to do that because there's so much incoming.
Right. And I think so many of these emergency injunction cases, they're going to keep them hopping all summer. So
absolutely.
Andrew Weissmann, tell folks where they can find you online and on social media.
Sure. Well, I've got a Substack called Behind the Headlines. You can also just look for my name. And obviously I'm on MSNBC. Let me give it a big shout out to, I do a podcast with Mary McCord It's now called Maine Justice. Some
Maine
people
Justice.
might know it because it used to be called Prosecuting Donald Trump. That's no longer relevant. So Maine Justice is great because Mary McCord is great.
Well, that's awesome. And Andrew, I want to thank you for coming on today. And folks, once again, we are recording this in the morning before the court has started to issue its decisions. So if you go, why didn't they talk about X? It's because it hasn't happened yet. All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.
You're the best.